Welcome to this series on how to use shared reading to build language and early literacy skills. In this presentation, we will be discussing how you can build children's understanding of stories using shared storybook reading. Narrative knowledge describes a child's ability to understand and produce spoken and written descriptions of events experienced in the past, present, or the future. A narrative or story can be short. I found my shoes, I put them on. A narrative can be long. I found my shoes, they are new. I just got them. I put them on and then I got on the bus. After that, I got to school and was almost late. A narrative can describe a real event, or it can tell about a made-up or fictional event. Once upon a time, a fairy princess found a pea under her bed. She didn't know how the pea got there, but she found it and she ate it. Then she fell asleep and the prince came. The end. So why is narrative knowledge important? Narrative knowledge is a critical part of a child's overall language system. Children use narratives to follow directions, to tell others about their experiences, explain how they are feeling about something, and engage in creative play with others. Understanding how stories work is a part of the background knowledge that a reader brings to a text, and it lays the foundations for reading comprehension. Children develop their narrative skills every day through listening and engaging in conversations. The telephone is an excellent tool for building narrative ability. When we talk on the phone, we lose many of the cues that support face-to-face conversations, such as facial expressions and gestures. This means we must use conversation that is more precise to carry our meaning. So, encourage children to share news of their exciting backyard soccer game or excursions with relatives on the phone. Encourage children to relay the events of the day to a parent or sibling when they arrive home, and take turns at making up stories. This is a wonderful way of developing narrative skills and imagination. You can also build children's narrative knowledge whenever you engage in shared reading of a storybook. Shared reading is the interaction that occurs between an adult and a child when reading or looking at a book. Shared reading is not intended to teach children to read. It is about building children's spoken language and early literacy skills to prepare them to engage in reading instruction. Storybook reading provides wonderful opportunities for children to hear and learn different types of stories. Here are some tips for shared reading. Repeated reading of storybooks helps children to develop their language and literacy. Try to read each new storybook at least 4 times over a few weeks. If a child has a language difficulty or language disorder, manipulative books such as lift the flap books, as well as books with less text and shorter sentences, may increase their engagement and enjoyment of shared reading experiences. And remember, you don't have to read the exact words in the book. Make the sentences shorter and use easier to understand language if this will help the child to engage. When sharing a book with children, talk about the characters in the story. You could say, for example, characters are people or animals in stories. All stories have characters. In our book, we meet Daisy, Kim, and Bob. They are the characters in our book. Or you could say, this story is all about a cranky elephant that lived in a zoo. The cranky elephant is one of the characters in this story. Or, as we read, let's think about the characters or who the story is about. You might talk about the setting of the story. You could say, for example, the setting tells us where the story takes place. The setting can also tell us when the story happens. As I read, think about the setting or where the story is taking place. You could say, Our story took place in the dry, dusty outback. The outback is the setting of the book. Have children tell you what they remember about the setting in the story. You could say, "Help me describe the outback. What did we see in the outback?" Prompt children as needed. You might say, "We saw lots of lizards and dry, dusty dirt. Remember when the people slept outside under the stars and swam in the billabong?" Show the pictures in the book to help children talk about the setting. When reading books, you can talk about the kickoff or complication of the story. The kickoff in a story is something that happens that gets the story going. The kickoff makes the characters go into action. So in your story, the kickoff might be scary, like a cranky bear roaring in the dark. Another story might have a magical kickoff. Perhaps you wake up with fairy wings. A story might have a surprise kickoff, like you find a treasure chest. You might say, "Can you tell me what the kickoff was in our story? What got the story going?" You can also talk about the key events in the story you are reading. So, during reading, stop occasionally and summarize the key events of the story. You might stop at the beginning of the book and say, for example, "The possum is making a terrible mess in the kitchen." You might stop in the middle of the book and say, "Now the possum is trying to escape from the house, but it doesn't know where to go." And then you might stop again at the end saying, "The family decided to just leave the possum sleeping in the bed." After reading, ask children to help you retell the story. You could say, "Let's see if we can retell our story. First, the little rabbits met by the lake for a picnic. Then, a strange noise frightened them all and they ran away. Next, all the other animals saw the rabbits running and joined with them. Last, the animals realized that the noise wasn't scary at all, and they went back to having fun in the park." And finally, you might talk about how the story ends. You might say, "A story always has words at the end that finish the story. How did this story finish? That's right, all the ducks got safely home in time for tea. How else could this story have ended? Perhaps we could have said, all the ducks got safely home in time for bed." Encourage children to offer more possible endings. Or you might say, "Some stories we read finish with the words 'the end,' but we can use more interesting words to show that a story has finished. In this story, Annie told Benny that he could never sit on her chair again without her." Another story might be a fairy tale and end with the words, "and they all lived happily ever after." You could say to a child, "Let's think of some different words we could use to end this story." Have fun and enjoy building narrative knowledge in your classroom through shared book reading.